writers than I do. They're slightly more sort of, there's a bit more shadow and the black T-shirts and all of that stuff. And I can't really quite carry that off. I'm working on it, but I can't really. Well, I can't do it. But I did go to a wonderful one in Muncie, Indiana, which is a very nice place in Indiana. And I went to a murder convention there, a murder book convention, and there were all these.
I was 7 years old,
and there were all these ladies there. It was predominantly American ladies in hats, and they were sitting there, and there were the genuine mystery writers, crime writers, who were all very convincing, and then there was me. But it's the only conference I've gone to where the entire audience throughout the conference was knitting. They sat there and knitted through the papers, and I think that might catch on. You might go to sort of serious academic conferences, medical conferences, and things like that, and knitting might become more popular.
I read a story once on that note because you were talking earlier about psychopaths, and I didn't want to leave that just yet. I mean, just to think about the extremely successful life that this man led, fiction aside, including being a member of the UNESCO International Bioethics Commission. And you were asked what you'd learned about human behavior from all the work that you've done in bioethics and in criminal law. And you talked, I don't know if you recall this, but I found it fascinating. You talked about disabled parking spaces.
Oh, yes. I thought I wasn't going to remember what you were talking about, but I do now know what you're talking about. Yes, I read somewhere, now this is in entirely second-hand knowledge, I read somewhere that the people, the able-bodied people who park in disabled parking places are psychopaths. That if you did a study
know
of these,
who you are.
Yes, exactly. If you did a study of these people, you would find that they were psychopathic in their attitude, and it's the best way of identifying these people.
But no, truthfully, the police, in the work that you've done with police departments, and the information that they've all, gleaned from their,
yes.
That's what they said.
No.
Oh, it's more fun that way. I believed you.
No, I just read it in the newspaper. I just read it in the newspaper. It has no greater authority than that. It probably wasn't even a reliable newspaper. But
don't trust the
I
media.
did read it. This business of parking is quite interesting because just going a little bit further into the parking issue, I was hoping you'd raise parking. Because if you look at crime novels actually usually deal with murders. The standard crime novel is about a murder. Now, I think that's highly unrealistic because, in fact, murder is a very unusual crime. Thankfully, the murder rate is very small, and so the likelihood of a murder occurring is really very, very small, as you say, thankfully. And yet crime writers suggest that it's the absolutely standard crime. And all these books about murders, there aren't enough murders to go round to keep the crime book industry going. And I think there should be a shift in emphasis onto more realistic crimes. And what are the most common offences? Parking offences. And and I think we should have more parking offence novels in which this crime is looked into. I wrote a short story for a collection. I was asked to write a short story for a collection of crime stories, and I pursued this point. And I wrote a story called "No Place to Park." And what actually happened was that there was a crime writer who decided that he would be more realistic, and therefore attach himself to the parking department rather than to the homicide department. So he went round with the parking department, and they went up to a car which indeed wasn't displaying a valid parking ticket. And the driver was in it, and they began to remonstrate with the driver when he pulled out and drove off, and there was a body under the car. So that's an example of not having the courage of your convictions to follow through with the theory.
And in this book, It's two cows.
Two cows fall foul of somebody. Yes, yes. That's about the strongest, most exciting thing that happens in these books. Because generally speaking, in the number one ladies detective agency books, nothing untoward happens. In fact, not very much happens at all. Because I take the view there's quite enough happening in the world today without authors making things worse by inventing.
Killing people.
Exactly, yeah. Exactly. So these books are really concerned with very minor events. There's a lot of drinking of tea in them, and eating of cake.
Yes.
And indeed sitting about. The characters sit about a lot. Now, that sitting about, interestingly enough, is not accidental. That's the result of market research on my part. I've done extensive market research, Seamus, and I've...
Yourself?
Yes, and I've discovered that the vast majority of my readers are sitting down when they read the books. And this, therefore, allows them to identify with the characters. And I expect that the vast majority of the people who watch your programs on the television are sitting down.
A fair number.
And that, well, you usually sit down for your programs, don't you?
Usually.
Well, there you are.
So the vast majority, we can agree on that.
They'll identify.
I had all these very serious questions to ask you, and it just seems to have taken a turn, you know?
Well, I think
I don't want to ruin the mood.
These are pretty serious issues we've been discussing.
Yes, they are.
I've regarded them as serious. Have you not regarded them as serious?
I've never laughed at the word psychopath so much in my life. Okay, first of all, let's talk about what I think, because I know you don't like talking about this yourself necessarily, although the evidence is clear in the amount of work that you produce. You can write, is it 1,000 words in an hour?
Yes, I do, yes. Yes, it's, I'm very conscious of my good fortune in that respect, in that I don't really have to think about what is happening in the book. I go into a sort of dissociative state, and then it comes to me. So it's rather like I've spoken to.
Is it like having a vision? I mean.
Well, it's not very visual. Interestingly enough, I don't actually see my characters' faces.
Really?
Yes. When they filmed the number one ladies detective agency, they were very keen. People were very keen to find out whether the characters looked as I had envisaged them. And indeed, I went to the set of the first film that Anthony Minghella made in Botswana, and I met Jill Scott, who plays Mara Matswe, and people said after me, well, does she look like Mara Matswe? And I said, yes, because I don't actually have a preconceived idea of what Mara Matswe looks like. All I'm aware of is that Mara Matswe is traditionally built lady and has a smile. And so that was absolutely fine. So I don't tend to see the scenes that I write about. What I do is I hear the people, and I suppose I'm aware of what they're thinking, but I don't tend to visualize things.
So you channel words. You don't.
It's words.
Interpret visions.
No, it's words. Yes, that's right. It's words. I hear a sort of rhythm in my mind, and the words fit into that. It's almost as if I hear a beat.
Wow.
And the words fit into that. I've discussed this with composer friends, one in particular, and I'm in awe of composers who can look at a score and they hear what they see written on the page. I find that the most amazing thought, and I really am totally in awe of that ability. But I think that what is happening is a similar thing with the words. I hear them. I don't hear them being spoken, but they're there, and then they come out almost as a sort of beat or music.
Well, aside from being prolific, I think what I find equally impressive, in just speaking to Sharon about your ability to turn it on and off. So when you're flying from, was it Chicago to Houston, you know in that flight time you'll be able to write a chapter and a half.
Yes.
From Newark to Toronto, you know you can write a chapter.
Yes, New York to Toronto was about 1,000 words, 1,000 words flight. That's, but I don't think in terms of air miles. I think in but you know, Seamus...
What do you do to people sitting next to you going, what are you writing?
Well, you think that, but in fact, there are an awful lot of people on planes writing books. I've discovered that. In fact, there are many flights where the vast majority of people are working on their novel. And then you know that this is happening because when the plane begins its descent, they say, we're now beginning our descent into Toronto. Would you please finish your chapter?
Are you seat upright or do you put seat back?
Well, it depends. It depends. Legroom, you need a certain amount of legroom to write the novel. You've got to have a certain distance from your laptop. You can write it in more crowded circumstances where the laptop is immediately... Those are for the more intimate scenes. This is going downhill very quickly, you know. It really is.
I'm just amazed how you bring me back out and you call me. I fall for it again. God, I got to factor in some serious questions here, and our audience, I know, will do that for us a little bit later. Let's talk about. I find it fascinating how you describe working that your writing lends itself more to the word processor, that lends itself more to the electronic form of writing. Tell us more about that.
Well, I think probably in common with many people, I find it very easy to use a word processor. In that it really does facilitate writing. I think possibly
There's no romance of the longhand or the typewriter or the dictation.
That's interesting because there are some writers who are quite ritualistic in the way in which they write, and I know people who say to me, well, we have to be facing west or whatever, and the chi forces have to be circulating around the room in a particular direction, that sort of thing. Or they use a particular sort of pencil or a particular sort of pen and a particular sort of pad of paper. So there are quite a lot of people who do that. We had a writer in Scotland, Nigel Tranter, who wrote all his books. He wrote books of historical interest. And he wrote all his books while walking around. And he walked around outside writing his books, and he had a pad. And he used to walk, and this is, I suppose, the sort of writing. Writing isn't normally a dangerous career, but he used to walk along the cliffs of Scotland. And that, I thought, actually raised the insurance category into which writing falls. And he had a sort of a waterproof cover so that if rain came, he'd just put that over the pad and then continue. Niall Marsh wrote all her books in the bath. She had a special sort of apparatus and wrote books in the bath.
Churchill read all his cabinet papers.
And Churchill, yes, he did a lot of work in the bath, and so on. Barbara Cartland would bedeck herself in a pink feather boa and lie on a chaise longue and dictate to a secretary. Apparently, she wrote 3,000 words a day, and the secretary would say 3,000 words, and then she'd shout, "That's it," and then she'd get up and carry on with the day. So the people, she was quite prolific, actually. I mean, 3,000 words a day is quite a lot. Flaubert wrote 35 words a week. But very, very good ones. That's 5 words a day. And I suppose if you extracted all the definite and indefinite articles, it probably went down to about 22, which is not very many. But anyway, so ritual. Yes, I write to music. I like listening to music. I like listening to, when I write Isabel Dalhousie, when I sit down to start an Isabel Dalhousie chapter, I put on Soave sul vento from Mozart's Così fan tutti, because it's such a beautiful trio. It's the most divine piece of music ever written, and it's got such a lovely message. May the wind that accompanies you on your journey be a gentle one, and may all your desires come to fruition. What a lovely message to give to anybody, and And so I listen to that. And then with Mara Motsui, I play a wonderful East African musician called Ayo Bagada, and I put Ayo Bagada on, and I'm transported back to Africa, and I write. And so music helps.
Is that the music on your website, by the way? Because you've got a new website, and there's a glorious soundtrack.
No, they composed a special music for that. That's for my my New York website. Has got very appealing music on it. They had somebody write that. Yes, I like that music.